Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lisa Johnson. I'm the president of the Bossier Chamber of Commerce, and we are going live on Facebook, and we also have a webinar via Zoom. So thank you to all of you that were able to join us for today's Thursday date with the Congressman and with the Bossier Chamber of Commerce. So every Thursday we are doing something a little different, and today we're doing public policy, and we have asked Congressman Mike Johnson to join us today as he has been appointed to several new committees. And his time may be short with us today because of a lot of votes that are happening on the Hill. But just very quickly, as a reminder, and of course we know the Congressman very well. This is his third term in Congress. He was first elected to the U.S. House of Representatives on December 10th, 2016. But let's just review these very critical committees that he is on, and these new ones that are really, really important to the state of Louisiana and Northwest Louisiana, Shreveport, Bossier. So he is newly appointed, so excited, to the House Armed Services Committee, and he's on the subcommittee on readiness, subcommittee on security, and he's also on the Judiciary Committee, Subcommittee on the Constitution, Civil Rights and Civil Liberties, the ranking member in that area. And he's a Subcommittee on Antitrust, Commercial and Administrative Law, and Subcommittee on Courts, IP, and the Internet. So before I turn it over to the Congressman to just kind of give us an update on all of his new appointments and his thoughts on how working with the new administration and what does that mean for our area and how we're going to make that happen and bring that money home. If you have any questions for the Congressman, being that this is a webinar, there is a Q&A section on the Zoom if you're joining via Zoom. And if you will click in that Q&A box, you can post your question there. And as time allows, we will answer those questions. Or if you're joining us on Facebook Live, you can pose your questions in the comments and we will direct those questions to the Congressman. So without further ado, Congressman Johnson, the floor is yours and welcome. It is so good to see you in person via Zoom.
In person via Zoom. Thanks, Lisa. Really appreciate it. Always delighted to help out and speak with and to and for the Bossier Chamber. You guys do a great job. At a pivotal time in Louisiana's history and in our nation's history, as you know, it's been a really crazy, I would say, months, weeks, year. I mean, we're in many ways uncharted waters as a nation. We all recognize it. We're all thawing out from Snowmageddon, the latest crisis as we had in North Louisiana. I spent the week in Benton in North Bossier. I was home because we didn't have votes that week. Thankfully, I was with Kelly and the kids, and it was quite an adventure. We all went through it together. But you know, when you thought everything couldn't get any crazier, then we had 6 inches of snow. It's par for the course of where we are in the country right now. You know, Capitol Hill is just about as crazy as everything back home seems to be. We're in an era of hyper-partisanship. The environment here, in so many ways, is just really toxic. I use the word unprecedented a lot, but it really feels that way. It feels like we're in an era that it almost seems unmatched, maybe since the time right before the Civil War, where the two sides there's really a lot of vitriol and acrimony between the two sides. So y'all know me and my brand. I'm not a fire breather, and I don't launch grenades. I believe in the legislative process. I'm an old nerdy constitutional law attorney. I believe in what the founders intended and created for this extraordinary experiment that we have in self-governance. And the idea that we have to work together, that if you're going to have a constitutional republic, which I remind everybody all the time, is still an experiment on the world stage. We don't know how long this American experiment can last. We're the leader of the whole world for a lot of reasons, but there's no guarantee that we'll always have this republic. And when the founders were leaving that hall in Philadelphia, Benjamin Franklin was famously stopped on the street. And what have you given us, sir? He said, a republic, ma'am, if you can keep it. And we have the charge to keep it. And how do we do that? If you're going to have a government of, by, and for the people, as Lincoln said in the Gettysburg Address, there's some presuppositions to that. It means, in the old days, they used to regard the divine right of kings. There was the sovereign, there was God, and there was the earthly king, and then all the subjects, right? And the king was in charge of everything. Well, we remove the king. That's what the American Revolution was all about. And we remove the intermediary, so it's just our creator and us. He gives us our inalienable rights, as the founder said, and we have to govern ourselves. And so if you're going to have a self-governing republic, one of the presuppositions is that you will have the duly elected representatives of the people who will be willing to come together and work together, not regard one another as enemies, but be able to get around a conference table sometimes and hash out and work out our policy differences. And increasingly, it's become more and more difficult to do that here. So if it's any comfort to you, there's a big group of us who are working on that. You know, I co-founded the Honor and Civility Caucus with my Democrat colleague, Charlie Crist, a couple of Congresses ago. And it's been more difficult on us, those of us who want to advance those ideals, to do it in this environment. But we're not giving up. We're going to keep doing it. I'm really grateful to God. In spite of myself, I've kind of been on a rocket trajectory up here, and I don't really understand it all, but I found myself as vice chairman of the conference now, starting my 5th year in Congress, and that's in the top 5 leadership positions. And that's really, really helpful for our state and certainly our district, for Bossier Parish, where I hail from, because you know the deal on Capitol Hill is it's about seniority and influence. And so being in one of the top leadership positions is a really important thing for us. Steve Scalise, as y'all know, is still the whip on the Republican side. So that's the number 2 position. So we've gone back through the history books. We think this might be the first time that 2 Louisiana representatives have been in the top 5 leadership posts. And that's a big deal for our state. And so we're trying to be good stewards of that platform that I believe God's given us. And so I'm also have these committee assignments that Lisa just went through, and they're really, really important. I am so excited to finally have gotten on the House Armed Services Committee. As y'all know, we've talked about this a lot. We have one of the biggest military districts in the country in terms of the importance of those issues, because we have not only Barksdale and Global Strike, but we have Fort Polk and the Joint Army Readiness Training Center down in Leesville in the south part of the district. We've got Camp Minden, National Guard facilities, and lots of military assets in the district, a lot of veterans issues and all the rest. I would have tried to get on HASC, the House Armed Services Committee, when I first came to Congress in January 2017, except that our good friend and my colleague, Dr. Ralph Abraham, was on the committee, and they wouldn't allow us to both be on it because we had adjacent districts. Well, now that Ralph's retired, the opening came up, and I was really grateful to be put onto that committee. So in addition to the Armed Services Committee, where I can watch out for the interest of Barksdale and all the things that we all care about so much, I'm on the Readiness Subcommittee, which is a great place to be looking out for new investments and other opportunities for our bases. And so that's going to be just a really key thing for Global Strike and all of our interests. And then I'm still doing my duty on the Judiciary Committee. They won't let me get off that, and I wouldn't, because that's my wheelhouse. And I'm the Republican leader on the Constitution Subcommittee, which continues to be ground zero for all the crazy things happening in Congress. So we've been very busy on that. There's a lot of things happening. By way of just quick update, the big thing this week you're hearing about is the $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill. We call it the Biden bailout bill. You may have seen, if you're following me on social media, we've been talking a lot about this, and we did a little pie chart. Kelly's an old school teacher. She told me that I'm a visual learner. We learned a long time ago. So I do well with charts and graphs, and a picture's worth 1,000 words. So I put a graph up the other night, or last night, I think it was. We did a little pie chart, and we were able to show that just 9% of this COVID relief bill, so-called, goes to COVID relief. 9% of it. The rest of it is just a big wish list of big government spending items that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer put together, including some big, what look like earmarks, naked earmarks in the bill for them. I mean, Pelosi gets 1.9 billion or something for a railway in her district. Chuck Schumer gets a bridge. In history, it's crazy. I was on Keel this morning with Robert and Aaron early this morning, and I was reading off some of these numbers. So 9% goes to the actual public health crisis. Meanwhile, 27% of the bill, $510 billion, goes to bail out the big blue states that have done lockdowns and killed their economies. 25% of it, $470+ billion, goes to policies that reduce private sector employment, including, we think it's still going to be in there when we vote on it tomorrow, the $15 minimum wage for federal employees. 18% of it, I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars go to the National Endowment of the Arts, Endowment for the Humanities, the Institute of Museum and Library of Sciences. Oh yeah, $12 billion for foreign aid. I mean, this is not what the country needs. It's not what the people need. Remember, we have a $27 trillion federal debt. I'm speaking Sunday at CPAC. I thought the Sunday afternoon time slot for speaking was not a great draw because a lot of people begin to leave the event and fly home from Orlando. But then President Trump agreed to do Sunday afternoon. So he speaks about 60 minutes after I'm done. So I'll have the biggest audience I've ever had at CPAC to do my speech. But the topic of mine is on the national debt. And I'm going to encourage the audience, and I would encourage you all to, if you haven't taken a look at it lately, just pull up on your smartphone the national debt and the debt clock, usdebtclock.org. And you can, I mean, the number goes up so rapidly, you cannot follow it with the naked eye. Last night, we were at 27.9 trillion. We're about to get to 28 trillion. And it's just a staggering number. And what we're doing to our kids is crazy. Listen to this stat. By the way, there's $1 trillion already remaining. It's like in the bank, unspent on the stimulus funding that we did in the previous rounds of this. So if this bill passes, and we think it probably will on party lines, it won't get any Republican support. But if you add it all up, we will have done, in the last 11 months, the federal government will have enacted $6 trillion in total COVID-19 stimulus money. If you do the math, it's $17,000 per citizen in the country, $69,000 for a family of four. It's more than the GDP of all the nations on the earth combined, excluding the US and China. I mean, these are just staggering numbers, and it's at the worst possible time, and they're doing it for political reasons. And so we're pretty upset about this. A couple other updates I'll tell you just real quick, and then I'll take questions if you want to do that, Lisa. We've heard a lot about infrastructure, and many of us on this call have been working really hard on, for example, the completion of I-49, which is way overdue. And we've gotten so close on that. And, we've been pushing the federal and state authorities on that. We just had a regime change. And so the Biden administration looks at infrastructure from a different lens than the Trump administration. I'll just tell you, I'm a little bit alarmed. The transportation secretary is Pete Buttigieg, you all have seen, and he gave a speech a couple of days ago, and he said in his words that he would prioritize racial justice and equality in federal highway project approvals above everything else, which I don't know, we don't know exactly what that means, but it may give some of the opponents of I-49 some wedge issue, another hurdle to trying to complete the interstate. And it's that would be a great tragedy, because the reason we all support that is because we genuinely believe it's good for everybody, every segment of the community, because we would have economic development that we really need. Having completed that highway is a big cog in the wheel, so to speak, for all that we do in Northwest Louisiana is the hub that we are. And we just hope that doesn't hold it up. So we'll hold off and see. We do expect, some speculate that defense funding may be on the chopping block because the Democrats have the majority in the House, that somehow they may try to go after defense spending to cover some of these COVID monies and all that. Obviously, we're going to fight that tooth and nail. It's the worst possible time to be cutting defense funding. We need to be spending it wisely, and in some cases increasing it pretty dramatically because of the threats that we face right now from China and Iran and North Korea and everybody, the culprits. The oil and gas industry, let me just speak to this. One of the first acts that President Biden took when he took the office was the moratorium on leases, oil and gas production on federal lands. It includes federal waterways. And this is a devastating thing for the state of Louisiana because of all the offshore production. It includes everything in the outer continental shelf. I mean, some of the estimates are, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of jobs. He of course stopped the Keystone Pipeline and all that, but as it directly pertains to us, the moratorium on leasing on federal lands is a huge hit to our state and our industry at a very, very difficult time. The flip side is that there's some belief that maybe this spurs on a little bit more development on private land, because if the federal lands are not available, then maybe somehow we benefit from that. But we sure pray that we can weather this yet another metaphorical storm. We've had enough. We've made the case. All of us in the delegation have made the case consistently. I genuinely believe that I can make a strong argument that Louisiana got hit hardest over the last year than any other state in the union. Because if you combine everything that we all went through together, all of our small businesses, all of our families, everybody I mean, not only did we get hit really hard by COVID in the state, as we all know, on top of that, we had the crisis in the oil and gas market. Then we had the record hurricane season, the devastating hurricane season that hit us. And then we had Snowmageddon on top of that. I mean, it just, when does it end, right? But we're a very resilient people. And I tell everybody all the time that this is not the time to despair. This is the time to dig in and do what everybody on this call is called to do, I believe, and that is to double down on the policies and the principles that we know are good for our communities, and that is the support of small business. It's the support of holding the line on these ideas that they're going to raise taxes dramatically on business and individuals. It's trying to defend the extraordinary regulatory reforms that we were able to accomplish in the Trump administration by rolling some of that back, cutting red tape. We cannot turn back the clock. We can't go backwards because the economy will suffer dramatically if we do. And our small businesses that are just struggling to hold on will struggle even further. And I can tell you story after story from constituents, but you all know it as well as I do, just the heartache and the tragedy and the difficulty that people have been through over this last year. It's just an unbelievable thing. I have testimonial after testimonial, business owners in our district sending me their real numbers, raw numbers, and saying what this has meant to them and what it would mean, for example, if the minimum wage was forced to be hiked to $15 an hour, that kind of thing. This is real stuff, and it's a powder keg right now because the country is in such perilous moment. I believe we're at a historic juncture right now. For my side of the aisle, I'll just tell you, I am very confident that we can take back the majority for the Republicans in the House in 2 years for that first midterm election. If you look historically, the president in power almost always loses somewhere on average between 27 and 29 seats for his party when that first midterm election. And so Nancy Pelosi has a razor thin majority on us right now. We're going to add even more to our ranks. I think when Julia Letlow wins the Congressional District 5 race in March, that Luke Letlow left vacant when he passed. And so we'll have a strong team, and I think we can make gains and give some balance in government again in 2 years. So that we're holding out, we're fighting for that. We're going to defend our policies and the values of Louisiana and the interest of our area. And I'm really grateful for all y'all doing that cause as well. So I probably talked too long, Lisa. I don't know what the schedule is. I didn't see it, but you want me to take questions, or what's the best way to do it?
Congressman, we do have a few questions, and thank you for those remarks. So we have comments are being made in the comment section on Facebook Live, not necessarily any questions, which is what I think you're kind of used to. And then, but we do have some questions in our Zoom meeting here. I'm going to start with, and you talked about bipartisanship and being able to work together and what have you. So, and our good friend here locally, Wayne Brown, you know him very well. So his question is, with our delegation in the minority party and a new administration, how can we in the business community help you work with the other side of the aisle and our new president to support Barksdale Air Force Base and the many other important needs for our area?
That's a great question, Wayne, and I'm glad you're asking it. And the answer is, let's stay tuned on it. See, the problem is because of the COVID thing and the anomalies and the January 6th debacle and all that stuff. This Congress has really been off to a slow start. It took us weeks after we all took the oath of office in early January just to get the committees together and to kind of get the machinery of government working. There was nothing to vote on the floor for, until the middle of this month, really, because there was no committees to run legislation through and all that. So we just had our organizing meetings for some of the committees here in the last 2 weeks. And so this Congress has been off to a slower start than previous Congresses. From my perspective, that may not be a bad thing because I'm not excited about some of the things that the Democrat majority has planned. But the question is a good one, an important one. We're on a wait and see kind of position right now because we don't yet know exactly what the agenda is going to be, for example, in armed services with regard to defense. We have some speculation but there's really nothing hardcore on paper yet that's being proposed. So I'm grateful, and I know where you are on that, and you're going to be an important voice. I really do believe, because the point we try to make all the time is we have got to focus on the things that draw us together and the things that we agree on. And there is remarkable agreement across the aisle on the interest of national defense and the importance of our military installations. The House Armed Services Committee is one of the least partisan committees on the Hill, gratefully. I'm thankful for that. It'd be a unique change for me to serve on a committee like that, because Republican and Democrat, the people that are there are serious about that responsibility. They know what it means to our country, to the idea of maintaining peace through strength. And there's very little partisan acrimony. In fact, in the last Congress, the National Defense Authorization Act was named in honor of the retiring Republican, the senior Republican on the committee, as he was going out, by the Democrat majority. I mean, it was a great gesture and a good sign that there's a lot of things that work together. We worked really hard to keep the Defense Authorization Act an objective, nonpartisan kind of piece of legislation. Both sides have always held back on putting their, pet projects and sort of, partisan policy things in there, because we know how important that is to navigate through and make sure it becomes law. So hopefully we can hold the line on that, and I think we've got a good prospect to do it. And I really do mean that, Wayne, and others who have that interest will be in close contact with you, because there may be moments where we all kind of speak with one voice, so to speak, and I think that'd be real valuable. So thanks for saying that.
So Congressman, to kind of speak to that a little bit further of the wait and see game, I was on a meeting this morning with some local civic leaders and community leaders. And actually, Rich Brontoli with the Red River Valley Association had reported to us that they were hearing that the president's budget was not going to be out for a while. And so they're in a wait and see situation too, when it comes to funding for the Red River and the dredging and what have you. And once we see the budget, but we're going to see a budget a little bit later than we normally do. So we are in a wait and see game while things are getting together.
Yeah, and normally, the president's budget in a typical year, it would come out February, and then, Congress is charged with presenting a budget thereafter, and then there's supposed to be a discussion about how that works. It's all kind of been blown up in the last few years, and in the last Congress, Speaker Pelosi never presented a budget at all. They never did it, and which is just kind of a shocking thing to consider. But last Congress, I chaired the Republican Study Committee, which is the largest caucus of conservatives in Congress. We had 148 members, and we did a Republican budget that we presented. And we walked around for the whole 2 years saying we had the only budget in town. Literally, we did. So we do need the administration to come out with their budget, because it is a new administration. No one yet knows where the benchmarks are and all that. And they've got to put some flags in the ground, so to speak, so that we can begin negotiation and all of the horse trading and all that. So there is some talk about earmarks coming back. Y'all may have seen that. I'm not a big fan of earmarks, but before anybody asks the question, I'll tell you, I believe about earmarks just like I do about term limits. So I've co-sponsored multiple bills since I got here, and I do every Congress, to institute term limits for members of Congress, because I believe desperate times call for desperate measures. And some people say, well, you're not intellectually consistent though, because you won't term limit yourself. And there's a real simple answer for that. I would like for term limits to be across the board. I think it should apply to everybody. But until that happens, until that day comes, I would do a disservice to my district if I only term limited myself and everybody else rose in seniority around us. It would not be right for the people I represent. So we're not intellectually inconsistent about that. We're completely consistent in the principle, and I'll stand on that every day. And the same thing is true with earmarks. I think the process in many ways corrupts the system, and I'll fight for them not to come back. But you can rest assured that if they do come back, I will be at the table like everybody else, because I will have to do that to defend our district and to do what, to use the seniority that we've been given here and the influence. So that's the answer to that. And we need broad scale reform. We'll keep pushing for it, and we'll see where it goes. So
another question that we have here is from I'm not sure if y'all have had the pleasure of meeting, but retired, I think I have his title right, Colonel Scott Solomon from the Air Force, and he is now with AT&T and government and works specifically with defense funding and structure and what have you. So his question to you is, Congressman, where can we get a copy of the Cliff Notes for the existing stimulus bill and proposed stimulus bill that breaks down the real numbers so we can educate the community on what it's really paying for?
I happen to have that right in front of me, Colonel. I'll send it to Lisa. We got our budget committee, the Republicans on the budget committee did a simple one pager, and then there's a little bit more lengthy 3 or 4 pager that goes with it. And it's really important to have the Cliff Notes because, as you know, these big spending bills, I mean, they could be over 1,000 pages, and it's difficult for people to sift through all that. So we pulled out the raw numbers so you can see it. And you can see exactly how much actually is going to COVID, and it'll be alarming to a lot of people. So I'll be happy to. Well, after this is over, I'll send it to Lisa, and she can forward it around to everybody if you want to do that.
Great, thank you, Congressman. In your opening remarks, you had talked about infrastructure, and we know that's a really big deal, not only for the nation, but it's also a priority for the state of Louisiana. Can you give us a little insight on, and we've talked about this for many years, on a gas tax increase, and where do you think we're headed with that? Because the conversation is starting to, rise again for that, so that we can get better roads and bridges out there.
Yeah, and right on cue, you can hear the construction right outside my window here. Sorry about that. I'm on the 5th floor of Cannon. I moved up and got a much bigger office with my rising seniority, but they're still renovating our building, so I deal with this all day long. Sorry. Look, there is a lot of, I would say, anxious anticipation about an infrastructure package. The previous administration, President Trump, talked about it all the time. He just wanted to cut ribbons and build stuff, and he was hampered in a way a little bit by some of the dynamics. President Biden and Democrats are big supporters of infrastructure spending as well. The principle is universally, agreed to here. I mean, I believe, as somebody who is an advocate of limited government, I genuinely believe that infrastructure is one of the designed and important purposes of government. It's something that we should be investing in, and we haven't done it well and consistently enough. And that's why we're in the situation we're in on a state level or federal level, from my perspective. So we could get a big, broad bipartisan consensus on some infrastructure spending. The question is, what is that amount and how is it paid for? I mean, on the federal level, that's the debate we have because of that looming federal debt we're talking about. And now there's a lot of, the Trump administration were big advocates of public-private partnerships and all the rest. I think we do have to be innovative and think outside the box and all that. There's a lot of good discussion that goes on around here about that, and we'll see where it goes. Again, we're kind of waiting on the Biden administration to put some flags in the ground so we can see where they are. It's all conjecture right now. As far as the state roads and state highways and the real trouble we have in Louisiana, we know we have to be in as bad a shape as any state, if not worse. And y'all all know the reasons for that. I won't relitigate it here today, but our transportation trust fund's been raided over and over and over the years, and we just haven't. The state of Louisiana and its leadership has not been great stewards of those funds. Taxpayers have paid a lot of money in for infrastructure, and it's not gone to the places where it should have gone. And that's just it. So if y'all seen the roadshow for DOTD and our friends, David and the others who do the regional, DOTD, and I saw a slideshow, it's probably a year and a half ago. And they went up underneath the bridges in our region and took pictures of the bolts popping out and the iron rusting and cracks in the concrete. And at the time, I'm pretty sure they concluded the slideshow by saying we were on a 578-year replacement cycle for our bridges, which are engineered to last on average about 80 years apiece. So it's a crisis. And their closing argument at the slideshow was, hey, we're DOTD. We'll maintain whatever you give us. If y'all want to go back to gravel roads, we'll try to have the best gravel roads in the South. But this is the reality. There's a desperate need for funding. And one of the arguments is in the legislature that comes up every year is, well, let's increase the gas tax. I personally, I don't think that's the best approach. I think it's a perilous thing to do right now when the economy is teetering on the brink and people's household incomes are down and we still have a high unemployment rate and all that. I just think I think we're playing with fire. I think that we have, I genuinely believe, I continue to believe that there's a lot of ways to do state government a lot more efficiently than we do. And that we have to do a lot of that so that we can properly prioritize infrastructure spending and not have it an afterthought as it's been for decades. And, we could talk about that all afternoon and I'll unpack more of it maybe in another forum, but I'm not a big fan of increasing the gas tax, and I've been consistent about that.
Well, thank you for that. And it is a hot topic and we're going to continue to hear about it. We have a couple more questions here. One from Rusty Cooper, and he is asking, Congressman, can you speak to the timeline on the vote on the Equality Act and the likelihood that this piece of legislation will be voted down?
Well, great question. Right before I came on with you all, I was live on the House floor, and Jim Jordan and I were leading the Republican 45 minutes of speeches opposing the Equality Act. We call it the Inequality Act. I'll just tell you, the Democrats are making their counter presentation, and they say the Equality Act is to make sure that we don't have discrimination against LGBTQ communities and all these other, look, and in my speech, I just said it very simply, and I said it from the heart because I believe this. I said, look, I looked over at Congressman Cicilline, my colleague on the other side of the aisle, who's the named sponsor of the bill, and I said, look, everybody here, every single member of this House, Republican and Democrat, believes that every single person is entitled to dignity and respect. I believe that every single person is made in the image of God, and because of that, they have inestimable dignity and value. And the founders believe that. They put it in our founding documents, right back in the nation's birth certificate, the Declaration, that we're all created by God, and because of that, we have this value and we have these inalienable rights that He has endowed to us. The rights don't come from the government; they come from God Himself. The problem with this bill is that in the zeal to try to protect against discrimination, it runs roughshod right over all these fundamental inalienable rights that God has given us. The rights to religious freedom, are trampled in this. The right to life. If you read into this bill, you'll see that it would open a Pandora's box for abortion on demand and taxpayer funding of abortion. It would run roughshod over our first freedom, which is religious liberty. I mean, it says in the bill on page 25. They try to claim it's not there. Pull it up, Google it. Page 25. It says the Religious Freedom Restoration Act protections will not apply in the application of this new law. And what that means is RFRA was signed into law by Bill Clinton in 1993. It was championed by Jerry Nadler, who is the lead proponent of HR 5 on the floor that we were just debating just now. And at the time, they said religious freedom is so important and we must ensure these protections. It allows for conscience protections and religious freedom objections to some of these things. This is going to do the exact opposite. It's going to obliterate the religious freedom of everybody. And so I made the point. I said, because we believe in the dignity and value of every single person, and that everybody should be treated with dignity and respect, we have to oppose this legislation. That's it. If it was only what they said, that'd be different. But it's all sorts of other nefarious things. I mean, from business owners to individuals, parents, school kids, it's a nightmare. I could go on and on. That said, the bill is likely going to pass today. It'll be on a vote this afternoon. And, it's because they have a narrow majority. Yesterday, we had kind of the test vote, the rule vote on HR 5, the so-called Equality Act, and it passed 218 to 208. So the 10 vote margin, and that'll be the vote, I think, on the final bill. So they'll send it over to the Senate in its current form. And I mean, honestly, my prayer is that some common sense, reasonable Democrats like Joe Manchin of West Virginia and others will say this is a step too far, and they'll stop it. But I don't know. If it's a tie vote, 50-50, the Vice President, Kamala Harris, comes in and breaks the tie, and that's going to be the new law of the land. And it will be a nightmare in more ways than I can recount right here. So let's hope it doesn't pass.
One more question. I have a question for you, because I just don't want to assume that we understand what this means. And you said it was a number 2 position. So what does it really mean to serve as the assistant whip for the 117th Congress?
It's such a funny question. So I get elected vice chairman of the Republicans, which puts me in like a top 5 leadership position in the House. And then later, Steve Scalise is the whip, of course, my friend since we were at LSU, he's several years ahead of me. He comes up and he goes, "Hey, Mike, I need you to, will you be an assistant whip for me in the Congress?" I said, "Sure." I mean, it's like an afterthought, right? Well, people are more excited about me being an assistant whip than the vice chair of the conference. It's so crazy. But basically, look, it's a big team. It's not that big of a deal. The assistant whip is, I think I'm one of maybe 25 people or something. And all it is you just do kind of housekeeping when we are whipping a vote, that I'll be assigned 10 or so members. I'm just basically like the secretary to call those guys and make sure they're on board with us. If they're not, I'll go work on them. But when you're in the minority like this, it's easy to keep everybody in line. Everybody just votes together usually. So it's not a huge amount of work, but it's so funny that I guess it's the title that's exciting. The title sounds cooler than vice chair, but like as vice chair, I have much more authority than being an assistant whip. But anyway, we got a lot of press out of it. And I thought it was kind of funny. It was a great question. Basically, I'm just helping Steve count votes. That's pretty much what it is.
Oh my goodness. Okay. We do have someone that has their hand raised to ask a question. Terry Moore, who sits on our board. Jessica, can you assist me with unmuting him so that he can ask his question?
Hey, Congressman, thank you so much for what you did and what you do, continue to do, and representing us. And with all the political division, how do you just maintain and feel that you're getting support from the district? Because I know that's got to be troubling with some of the positions that you took.
Yeah, thanks, Terry. That's a great question. I have been really frustrated over the last year because of COVID. One of my favorite things to do is do town halls. We do a couple in every parish every year, go around. I have 15 parishes and 750,000 constituents, so it's a lot of area to cover. But it's real important to be with the people you represent so you can answer questions and talk about the issues they care about. And because of the COVID restrictions, we just haven't been able to do in-person gatherings until right about now, this spring. So we're scheduling all those now, but it's been a real challenge, not just for me, but for every member of Congress. We've done a lot of telephone town halls over the last year and some Zoom town halls and that kind of thing, but it's just not the same as being in person with people. So I'm really, really looking forward to the restrictions being lifted so we can have gatherings again. And I want to do kind of like a listening tour because so much time has gone by since we've been able to be in person with people, and go to just every section of the district that we can and just be there, be in those venues and just listen to people. I think there's a lot of value to that. To be a representative of the people, you got to hear their thoughts and answer a lot of questions and maybe sometimes misconceptions that are out there. And I look forward to that. So it's a great question. I mean, arguably it's a bigger challenge right now for all members of Congress than we've ever had, because we haven't been able to be in the presence of and physically touch and shake hands with the people we represent. It's a tough thing.
Well, Congressman, I know your time is short. Thank you, Terry, for the question, and thank you for joining us. And our chairman of the board, Barry Regula, is texting me and sending accolades. What a great time to visit with you. And, you're getting a lot of accolades and thank yous and comments in the Facebook as well. I really think we can wrap it up with a comment in the Q&A. It's not a question, but it's a comment from Beth Waldrop, and she says that she is so grateful for your leadership in our state and country. You are the epitome.
I'm the epithet too.
I'm like, Lisa. She says, you are the epitome of a scholar and a gentleman. Keep up the great work in the face of so much adversity and division in our nation. You are a gift to Louisiana and true blessing for us all. Thank you. Now, did your head just go like this?
That is undeserved and very kind, and I'm grateful. And I mean this sincerely. I always enjoy spending time with the Bossier Chamber and all of you for all you do. You are the engine that keeps our communities going, and I'm really grateful. And so let me be a resource to all of you, not just the chamber, but all of you individually. If there's any way I can help you, if there's an issue that's bugging you, if you want, you guys can reach me directly, and I greatly value that and rely upon your counsel on so much of that. So Appreciate you being engaged and involved, and I'm grateful for the kind words. So thanks for the opportunity today.
Thank you, Congressman. We look forward to DC opening up again so that we can come back up there and visit with you and your staffers. You've got a great team there. And one of your previous teammates is on the call with us from the Cyber Innovation Center, Brad Morris. So,
Hey, Brad. Yeah, great.
all right. Thank you. And have a great day. We appreciate you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.